Namaste, Dhanava Pranam. By the instruction and grace of our spiritual master, Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Shripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, we are here reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 3, the Status Quo, Chapter 21, Text 56. Atapi prechit tvam vira, yad artam tvam ihagata, advayam nirvyalikena, pratipadhyamahe hrida. In spite of all this, I ask you, O valiant king, the purpose for which you have come here. Whatever it may be, we shall carry it out without reservation. Purport. When a guest comes to a friend's house, it is understood that there is some special purpose. Kardama Muni could understand that such a great king as Swayambhuva, although traveling to inspect the condition of his kingdom, must have had some special purpose to come to his hermitage. Thus he prepared himself to fulfill the king's desire. Formerly, it was customary that the sages used to go to the kings, and the kings used to visit the sages in their hermitages. Each was glad to fulfill the other's purpose. This reciprocal relationship is called bhakti karya. There is a nice verse describing the relationship of mutual beneficial interest between Brahmana and Kshatriya. Kshatram dvijatavam. Kshatram means the royal order, and dvijatvam means the Brahminical order. The two were meant for mutual interest. The royal order would give protection to the Brahmanas for the cultivation of spiritual advancement in society, and the Brahmanas would give their valuable instruction to the royal order on how the state and the citizens can gradually be elevated in spiritual perfection. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 3rd Canto, 21st chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Conversation Between Manu and Kardama. Text 22. The marriage of Kardama Muni and Devahuti. Text 1. Maitreya uvacha Ivam aviskrita sesha guna karmo dayo munim savridaivatam samrad uparatam uvachaha. Sri Maitreya said, after describing the greatness of the emperor's manifold qualities and activities, the sage became silent, and the emperor, feeling modesty, addressed him as follows. 2. Manor uvacha Brahmashrijat svamukato yusman atma paripshaya chandomayastapo vidya yoga yuktan alampatan. Manu replied, to expand himself in Vedic knowledge, Lord Brahma, the personified Veda, from his face created you, the Brahmanas, who are full of austerity, knowledge, and mystic power, and are averse to sense gratification. Purport. The purpose of the Vedas is to propagate the transcendental knowledge of the absolute truth. The Brahmanas were created from the mouth of the Supreme Person, and therefore they are meant to spread the knowledge of the Vedas in order to spread the glories of the Lord. In Bhagavad Gita also, Lord Krishna says that all the Vedas are meant for understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is especially mentioned here, Yoga Yuktan Alampatam, that Brahmanas are full of mystic power and are completely averse to sense gratification. Actually, there are two kinds of occupations. One occupation in the material world is sense gratification, and the other occupation is spiritual activity, to satisfy the Lord by his glorification Those who engage in sense gratification are called demons, and those who spread the glorification of the Lord or satisfy the transcendental senses of the Lord are called demigods. It is specifically mentioned here that the Brahmanas are created from the face of the cosmic personality, or the Virat Purusha. Similarly, the Kshatriyas are said to be created from his arms, the Vaishyas are created from his waist, and the Sudras are created from his legs. Brahmanas are especially meant for austerity. Learning and knowledge are averse to all kinds of sense gratification. 3. Tatranhayasrachakchasman dosahasratsahasrapat pradhayam tasya hi brahma shatram angam prachakshate. For the protection of the Brahmanas, the 1,000-legged Supreme Being created us, the Kshatriyas, from his 1,000 arms. Hence, the Brahmanas are said to be his heart, and the Kshatriya his arms. Purport: Kshatriyas are specifically meant to maintain the Brahmanas, because if the Brahmanas are protected, then the head of civilization is protected. Brahmanas are supposed to be the head of the social body. If the head is clear and has not gone mad, then everything is in proper position. The Lord is described thus: Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmana Hitaya Cha. The purport of this prayer is that the Lord specifically protects the Brahmanas and the cows, and then he protects all other members of society, Jagaditaya. It is his will that the universal welfare work depends on the protection of cows and Brahmanas. Thus, Brahminical culture and cow protection are the basic principles for human civilization. Kshatriyas are especially meant to protect the Brahmanas as the supreme will of the Lord. Go Brahmana Hitayacha. As the heart is a very important part of within the body, so the Brahmanas are also the important element in human society. The Kshatriyas are more like the whole body. Even though the whole body is bigger than the heart is more important. 4. Eto hi anyun yam atmanam brahma kshatram cha rakshata rakshati smavyayo deva sayasad asad atmaka. That is why the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas protect each other, as well as themselves, and the Lord himself, who is both the cause and effect, and is yet immutable, protects them through each other. Purport: the entire social structure of Varna and Ashram is a cooperative system meant to uplift all to the highest platform of spiritual realization. The Brahmanas are intended to be protected by the Kshatriyas, and the Kshatriyas also are intended to be enlightened by the Brahmanas. When the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas cooperate nicely, the other subordinate divisions, the Vaishyas or mercantile people, and the Sudras or laborer class, automatically flourish. The entire elaborate system of Vedic society was therefore based on the importance of the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas. The Lord is the real protector, but he is unattached to the affairs of protection. He creates Brahmanas for the protection of the Kshatriyas, and Kshatriyas for the protection of the Brahmanas. He remains aloof from all activities. Therefore, he is called nirvikara, without activity. He has nothing to do. He is so great that he does not perform action personally, but his energies act. The Brahmanas and Kshatriyas and anything that we see are different energies acting upon one another. Although individual souls are all different, the superself or supersoul is the supreme personality of Godhead. Individually, one's self may differ from others in certain qualities and may engage in different activities, such as those of a Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya. But when there is complete cooperation among different individual souls, the supreme personality of Godhead as supersoul, Paramatma, being one in every individual soul, is pleased and gives them all protection. As stated before, the Brahmanas are produced from the mouth of the Lord, and the Kshatriyas are produced from the chest or arms of the Lord. At the different castes or social sections, although apparently differently occupied in different activities, nevertheless act in full cooperation, then the Lord is pleased. This is the idea of the institution of 4 varnas and 4 ashrams. If the members of different ashrams and varnas cooperate fully in Krishna consciousness, then society is well protected by the Lord without doubt. In Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that the Lord is the proprietor of all different bodies. The individual soul is the proprietor of his individual body. But the Lord clearly states, my dear Bharata, you must know that I am also Kshetragya. Kshetragya means the knower or proprietor of the body. The individual soul is the proprietor of the individual body, but the super soul, the personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the proprietor of all bodies everywhere. He is the proprietor not only of human bodies, but of birds, beasts, and all other entities, not only on this planet, but on other planets also. He is the supreme proprietor. Therefore, he does not become divided by protecting the different individual souls. He remains one and the same. That the sun appears on top of everyone's head when at the meridian does not imply that the sun becomes divided. One man thinks that the sun is only on his head only, whereas 5,000 miles away, another man is thinking that the sun is only on his head. Similarly, the supersoul, the supreme personality of Godhead, is one, but he appears to individually oversee each individual soul. This does not mean that the individual soul and the supersoul are one. They are one in quality as spirit soul, but the individual soul and supersoul are different. Text 5. Tava sandarshanad eva chiname sarva samshaya yatsvayam bhagavan pritya dharmam aharirakisho. Now I have resolved all my doubts by meeting you, for your lordship has very kindly and clearly explained the duty of a king who desires to protect his subjects. Purport. Manu described herewith the result of seeing a great saintly person. Lord Chaitanya says that one should always try to associate with saintly persons, because if one establishes a proper association with a saintly person, even for a moment, one attains all perfection. Somehow or other, if one meets a saintly person and achieves his favor, then the entire mission of one's human life is fulfilled. In our personal experience, we have actual proof of this statement of Manu. Once we had the opportunity to meet Vishnupad Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj. And on first sight, he requested this humble self to preach his message in the Western countries. There was no preparation for this, but somehow or other he desired it. And by his grace, we are now engaged in executing his order, which has given us a transcendental occupation and has saved and liberated us from the occupation of material activities. Thus, it is actually a fact that if one meets a saintly person completely engaged in transcendental duties and achieves his favor, then one's life mission becomes complete. What is not possible to achieve in thousands of lives can be achieved in one moment if there is an opportunity to meet a saintly person. It is therefore enjoined in Vedic literature that one should always try to associate with saintly persons and try to disassociate oneself from the common man, because by one word of a saintly person, one can be liberated from material entanglement. A saintly person has the power, because of his spiritual advancement, to give immediate liberation to the conditioned soul. Here, Manu admits that all his doubts are now over because Kardama has very kindly described the different duties of individual souls. Text 6. Distyame bhagavan drishto durdarsho yo kritatmanam distya padha rajasprishtam sirshname bhavata sivam. It is my good fortune that I have been able to see you, for you cannot easily be seen by persons who have not subdued the mind or controlled the senses. I am all the more fortunate to have touched with my head the blessed dust of your feet. Purport. The perfection of transcendental life can be achieved simply by touching the holy dust of the lotus feet of a holy man. In the Bhagavatam, it is said, Mahat Padha Rajo Bhisheka, which means to be blessed by the holy dust of the lotus feet of a Mahat, a great devotee. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Mahatmanastu, those who are great souls are under the spell of the spiritual energy, and their symptom is that they fully engage in Krishna consciousness for the service of the Lord. Therefore, they are called Mahat. Unless one is fortunate enough to have the dust of the lotus feet of a Mahatma on their head, there is no possibility of perfection in spiritual life. The parampara system of disciplic succession is very important as a means of spiritual success. One becomes a Mahat by the grace of his Mahat spiritual master. If one takes shelter of the lotus feet of a great soul, there is every possibility of one's also becoming a great soul. When Maharaj Rahugana asked Jadabharata about his wonderful achievement of spiritual success, he replied to the king that spiritual success was not possible simply by following the rituals of religion, or simply by converting oneself into a sannyasi or offering sacrifices as recommended in the scriptures. These methods are undoubtedly helpful for spiritual realization, but the real effect is brought about by the grace of a Mahatma. In Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's 8 stanzas of prayer to the spiritual master, it is clearly stated that simply by satisfying the spiritual master, one can achieve the supreme success in life. And in spite of executing all ritualistic performances, if one cannot satisfy the spiritual master, one has no access of spiritual perfection. Here the word akritatmanam is very significant. Atma means body, soul, or mind, and akritatma means common man, who cannot control the senses or mind. Because the common man is unable to control the senses and the mind, it is his duty to seek the shelter of a great soul or a great devotee of the Lord and just try to please him. That will make this life perfect. A common man cannot rise to the topmost stage of spiritual perfection simply by following the rituals and religious principles. He has to take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and work under his direction faithfully and sincerely. Then he becomes perfect without a doubt. And thus ends our reading for today. We'll continue from text 7 on Monday. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Shripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Srila Prabhupada Srila Guru Maharaj Srila Gurudev Srila Acharya Srila Shanta Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai. Our glories to the assembled devotees, our glories to the worldwide devotees, Sama Bhakti Veda Vranda Ki Jai. Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Nishingapoli Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Pur Dham Ki Jai, Baladev Subhadra Jagannath Ju Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Kiri Govardhan Gupta Govardhan Dham Ki Jai. Shankundra Associated Bhakti Devi Devi Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtan Yogi Ki Jai. Princeton Bhakti Vedanta Institute Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Saraswati Institute Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Saraswati Mat Ki Jai. Jai Gaur Premanandi Hari 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 Bo. Jai Srimati Uma Devi Rasi Ki Jai.
जय गुरुदेव श्रीपाद कृष्ण की केशव प्रभु की जय। धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद दीदी।